Hi, boys and girls. Today we're going to continue with Frindle by Andrew Clements, and today we're going to read chapter 12. Now, chapter 12 is kind of long, and so I'm going to divide chapter 12 into two parts. So I'm going to do part 1 and part 2, and so today I'm going to do part 1. So I'm going to divide the chapter into two parts because it's a really, really good chapter, and I don't want to rush this chapter, and so therefore I'm going to do two parts. So today I'm going to do part 1, and just a quick review. Remember, we left off from chapter 11, and the title of chapter 11 was Extra, Extra, read all about it. And remember that it was on the local newspaper, and now everybody knew about this new word that Nick had invented in the war that was going between Mrs. Granger and Nick. And so that's where we left off last time. And there was this important sentence that was, "What's the meaning of this?" Remember that Nick's mom said that to Nick, and then, "What's the meaning of this?" That's what the superintendent said to Mrs. Chatham, the principal. And, "What's the meaning of this?" That's what Mrs. Chatham, the principal, said to Miss Granger, because it came out in the newspaper, and now everybody, the 12,297 people in the town knew all about it. And so today we're gonna continue and see what happens. Actually, today's chapter is called Airwaves. And so, airwaves. And what that means is that airwaves has to do with the airwaves, so radio and television. So that this chapter is kind of easy to predict. I'm thinking that first it was on the newspaper, right? And now it's gonna be on TV or maybe the radio. And then this tells me that this is gonna get even bigger. You know, I thought it was going to stop, but now it's getting bigger. It's not only on the local newspaper, but now it's gonna be on TV maybe, or the radio. So let's read about it and find out what it's gonna happen. So today's chapter 12, is called Airwaves, and today we're gonna read part 1 because I'm gonna divide it into two parts. So here we go. Within a week after the article was published in the Westfield Gazette, the kids at the junior high and the kids at the high school had stopped using the word pen and had started using the word Frindle. They loved it. See? Because of the article that was published in the newspaper, now the kids in the high school and the junior high are using the word Frindle instead of pen. Nick became sort of like a hero for kids all over town, and he quickly learned that being a hero, even if you're only a local hero, isn't a free ride. It has a price. What does that mean? You know, I always wanted to be a hero. Super teacher. But I think being a hero comes with a price, because when you are a hero, you're expected to do a lot of things like Superman or Iron Man or Wonder Woman, right? You're expected to do a lot of things because you're a superhero. So Nick was some kind of local superhero. So let's see. People noticed Nick when he walked into his dad's hardware store, or when he stood in line at the penny pantry to buy a candy bar. He could feel it when someone recognized him, and it made him shy and awkward. That's an interesting feeling that he's getting, because Nick is usually not shy, and he definitely doesn't feel like he's not shy. He always wants to be doing things, but with this new thing, it's making him feel shy and awkward. He's like, if he feels weird, right? One thing I found out in this little paragraph is that Nick's dad has a hardware store. Okay, all right. Kids at school started expecting him to be clever and funny all the time. And even for a kid as smart as Nick, that was asking a lot. You see, when you're a superhero, you're expected to do a lot of things. Or when you do something amazing and very, very, very good, you're expected to keep doing that. It's like if you do really good in your writing and you're writing a lot and you're doing a lot of good paragraphs, then you're expected to continue to do that. Because that tells the teacher that you are capable of doing that, and then you can give more. And so people were expecting that from Nick. Every teacher, the office secretary, the principal, even the school nurse and the custodian all seemed to be watching, always watching. They were watching to see if he was going to come up with another idea, another good idea. His parents were great about everything. Again, they're supporting him because they're proud of him. True, his mom had been upset when the article first came out, and so had his dad. Nick had said, "But I didn't do anything wrong, Mom." And neither did that lady from the newspaper. And his parents could see that he was right. The things in the article were true. And the truth is the truth. And nothing could be done about it now. They're like, okay, everything that came out in the newspaper is true. Even though it made them uncomfortable to have their boy talked about all over town, secretly, Nick's mom and dad were pleased. Deep inside, they were very proud of Nick for coming up with this new word for the word pen, Frindle. After all, a brand new word is a pretty amazing thing. Their Nicholas was quite a fellow, no getting around it. Someone else in town thought this brand new word was pretty amazing. Bud Lawrence. Bud Lawrence had lived all his life in Westfield, and when he was only 19 years old, he had saved enough money to make an investment. So here's another character that our author Andrew Clements introduces, and his name is Bud Lawrence. And Bud Lawrence is kind of like one of those characters, kind of like Judy Morgan. They come only once or twice in the chapter. And so Bud Lawrence, it's an investor, like a business person. And so he had lived in Westfield, that's where Nick lives. Because remember, this is taking place in the state of New Hampshire, but the city is Westfield. And so Bud Lawrence lives in this area, in the same city as Nick. And he is an investor. An investor is people who invest in new things to make more money, a businessman. He saved enough money one time, and he always looked for good ideas. He looked around for a good idea and then bought the first Dairy Queen in the state. After a few years, he bought a McDonald's restaurant. That was almost 30 years ago. And these two restaurants had made him rich. One of the Westfield's leading citizens. So he's a rich person who lives in the city. So when Bud Lawrence saw the article about the new word, he had his lawyer file a preliminary trademark claim on the word Frindle. He thought about this. Remember, he's a businessman, investment. He was like, cha-ching, oh, Frindle, what can I do? Money, money, money. Or I can just imagine him and his brain thinking, what can I do so that I can get some money from this word Frindle? And so, it's going cha-ching, cha-ching in his brain, right? And so what he did was, it says, he had his lawyer file a preliminary trademark claim. A trademark is like you claiming that that's your word. But do you see the problem here? This man, he wants to take ownership of the word Frindle, because nobody has claimed it. Yes, we know that it's Nick's, but he wants to make money out of it. And so let's see what happens. Within 4 days, he had set up a small company that was selling cheap plastic ballpoint pens, specially imprinted with the word Frindle. So what he did was, I don't know if you can see. So this is a regular pen, and so each pen they have the brand. So this one is Bic Round Bic. So this is the brand of this pen. I don't know if you can see it, Bic. So that's the brand of this pen. So what he did was he made a pen, but he inserted the word Frindle. So I'm just imagining and thinking that maybe he either wrote Frindle across this way, Or maybe he wrote Frindle inside, but just so that it's just a regular pen, but just he put the word Frindle in it. And by doing that, he was gonna make money out of it. So let's see what happens. Because I turned my book around, now I lost my place. Oh, there it is. So he was, let's see, within 4 days, he had set up a small company that was selling cheap plastic ballpoint pens, specifically imprinted within the word Frindle. He sold 3,000 Frindles the first week. 3,000. And they sold so fast that the stores all over Westfield couldn't keep them in stock. So everybody wanted the pen, but it said Frindle. So everybody wanted it. And so pretty soon it was out of stock, right? Then just as quickly, kids stopped asking for Frindles. The sales slowed down, and Bud Lawrence started thinking about other projects. So it was, again, it's kind of like, remember what Mrs. Granger said, it's a fad. It's just for the moment, and then it's going to fade away. So when Bud Lawrence came up with the idea to sell pens with the name Frindle in it, everybody wanted them. They're like, yay, cool, everybody wanted to have it. And he sold 3,000 of them, and they were, people wanted more. But then after a while, it just kind of died down, and nobody wanted them anymore. A week later, it was Halloween, and the leaves started falling, and it seemed like the town was going to quiet down. See, the fad had faded away like Mrs. Granger had predicted. So they're like, oh, okay, what, Frindle, whatever. So just kind of, it faded away. And it would have faded away if it hadn't been for Alice Lunderson. So here's another character, just like a one-time character, Alice Lunderson. The word would have faded away if it wasn't for Alice Lunderson. Let's see what she did. Let's see what happened. Alice lived in Betherly, a town 7 miles away from Westfield. So Westfield, and then this place, Betherly, where Alice Lunderson lives, it's 7 miles away. And she worked part-time for the local CBS TV station in Carrington, a town about 75,500 people. You know where this is going, right? I hope you're thinking in your head, remember the time it's called Airwaves? And so this person, Alice Lunderson, she works at a local CBS station, TV station, and where there is 75,500 people. When there was an important area news, disasters like floods or tornadoes, or sometimes if she came across little stories that seemed cute or original, Alice will call the station news manager in Carrington. If it was a good story, or if it was a day when not much else was happening in the world, then the TV station would send out a van with a camera crew to shoot some videotape. So, they're not big stories, they're little stories that they pick up here and there. And so this was kind of like her job. Alice, though, because she is a reporter for the TV station, she wants to know, what's going on in the cities around. So Alice, subscribed to all the small town newspapers in the area to keep up with the local events. Most of them were published on Thursday, and they arrived at her house by Monday or Tuesday. Then it took her a day or so to look through them all. Here goes our airplane. Then it took her a day or so to look through them all. On Wednesday morning, she finally saw the article in the Westfield Gazette about the World War. You see, it had died down already in Westfield, but Alice got the newspaper, and she read it, and it was about the World War. She read it through twice. She's like, let me see. Interesting. Let me read it again. Interesting. She read it twice and looked at it carefully at the class photograph. She was sure that this story was a winner. She's like, this sounds like a good story. Pen, and then change it to Frindle. It sounded like a good story. The TV station manager in Carrington agreed with her. He called the CBS station in Boston, Massachusetts. So, because sometimes Boston picked up stories from the Carrington newsroom. The woman in Boston thought the story had some real zip to it. I mean, it was good. So she called the network news editor in New York. Oh, wow. So from New Hampshire to Boston, Massachusetts, to New York. If you take a look at the map of the United States, right? I gave you a map the other day. And so if you look in the map of the United States, I try to look for those states. Look for New Hampshire, look for Boston, Massachusetts, look for New York. They're all in the East Coast, okay? On this side, okay? So let's see what happens. They all think it's a good story. When the facts of the Westfield Gazette article got to New York, they sent it in a fax. The staff there loved it. They're like, oh, this is good. This is a good, juicy story. They looked over the schedule sheet for the week and decided it would be the perfect closing story for the CBS Evening News for the next day, Thursday. Orders flew back through the telephone links from New York to Boston to Carrington to Betherly. And by Wednesday at noon, Alice had a go order to take the story all the way. So remember, Alice is the one that found the story. So they made a bunch of phone calls, and then they say, yes, it's a go. Go ahead and run with that story. Let's see what happens. It was her first piece to get onto the national news, and 20 million viewers would see it. Wow, I hope you're thinking about this. This is getting big. Frindle is getting big. It went from Nick and his 5 friends, 6 kids, right? To the classroom, the language arts classroom in Miss Granger's classroom, to the rest of the school, to the junior highs and high school, to the whole city of Westfield, and now, and remember, then it went to the other, 12,000 people. And so now it's going to be seen by 20 million viewers. I can't even imagine that. Wow. Alice Lunderson and her camera crew stood on Mrs. Granger's front porch Wednesday after school. See, reporters do this. They know where you live. So they were right at Mrs. Granger's home, and they were waiting for her. Why were they there? To interview her, just the way Judy Morgan had interviewed her outside her classroom. This reporter is waiting outside her house. I wonder what Mrs. Granger is going to say. So, Alice Lunderson and her camera crew stood on Mrs. Granger's front porch Wednesday after school. Mrs. Granger was not impressed at all by the lights and the microphones. She looked right into the camera and said, I have always said that the dictionary is the finest tool ever made for educating young minds, and I still say that. Children need to understand that there are rules about words and language, and that those rules have a history that makes sense. And to pretend that a perfectly good English word can be replaced by a silly made-up word just for the fun of it, well, it is not something I was ready to stand by and watch without a fight. That's what she said. And so I like the last sentence because she says, and it's not something I was ready to stand by and watch without a fight. Again, remember, words, a battle, chess, Frindle pen, Frindle pen. A fight between Nick and Mrs. Granger, Nick and Mrs. Granger, right? And so that's what she said in her interview. And then the interviewer says, "And have you lost that fight, Mrs. Granger?" asked the reporter. She's like, "Have you lost that fight yet?" Mrs. Granger turned her eyes up to nearly full power as she looked into the camera, and with a pale smile, she said, "It's not over yet." See, she's like, it's not over yet. She's like, "I haven't given up on this fight. It's not over yet." And when Alice and the crew showed up at Nick's house, the Allen family was ready for them. So you see, they're gonna go from house, they're gonna go interview all the people, right? So now they're at Nick's house. So there she is, the reporter's there, and they were waiting for them. Mom and Dad sat on the couch with Nick between them. Nick squinted into the lights. His mom had worked out with Nick what he could say and what he couldn't say. So they knew that they were coming, but this time they kind of coached him. You can say this and you can say that, but you can't say this, right? His mom had worked out with Nick what he could say and what he couldn't say. "You remember, young man," she had told him as she combed his hair. She wanted to make sure that he looked good in camera. "These reporters are just looking for a quick story that will make some excitement. But you have to stay here and live in this town, so mind your P's and your Q's." Basically, she was saying when somebody says mind your P's and your Q's, it means behave, right? So basically, that's what she was telling him. As they sat there on the couch, Mrs. Allen had her foot on top of Nick's under the coffee table. And if she pushed down, it meant that the reporter had just asked a question that she was going to answer for him. Mrs. Allen did not trust reporters. So, you know, sometimes when you're like, if your parents know that you're saying something that you're not supposed to, they kind of like edge you with their elbow. Or in this case, Mrs. Allen, she was just kicking him under the table. It's like, "Okay, stop it. I'm going to answer this question." They kind of had like a thing going, right? They had their little secret code. She had told him, "If I kick you under the table, that means that I'm going to talk, not you." "So tell me, Nick, why did you make up this new word, Frindle?" asked Alice Lunderson. So remember? So she says, "Why did you make up this new word, Frindle?" Why did he make up this word, boys and girls? Think about it for a moment. Why did Nick make up the word? Did you give it some thought? Let's see what he says. Nick gulped and said, "Well, my teacher, Mrs. Granger, said that all the words in the dictionary were made up by people, and that they mean what they mean because we say they do. So I thought it would be fun to just make up a new word and see if that was true." That's a good answer, right? Isn't that what we have learned so far? "And were you surprised when Mrs. Granger got mad about that?" asked Alice with a smile. She's like, well, your teacher told you to do that, and so were you surprised when she got mad at you for doing what she had taught you to do? There was a push on Nick's foot, and Mother said, so there's the clue. Mom is like, "I'm going to answer this question." There was a push on Nick's foot, and his mother said, "We never felt that Mrs. Granger got angry. When everyone started using the word Frindle, it just got to be a disruption. That's all. She's really a very fine teacher." See, Nick's mom, she doesn't want to say anything bad about Mrs. Granger because in reality, is there anything bad to be said about Mrs. Granger? I don't think so. I just think that she is right in her way, and so is Nick. They're both kind of right. That's why it's a battle. And so Mrs. Allen, Nick's mom, says, she's a really fine teacher. We're not mad at Mrs. Granger. "Yeah," said Nick. "I mean, I learned a lot about words, and without her, I wouldn't have." See, even Nick gives Mrs. Granger credit. He says, "I've learned a lot with her." "So, what's next for you and the new word?" Alice was wrapping it up. She could see that Nick and his parents were not going to be pushed into saying anything controversial, so she just kept it light and happy. "Well," said Nick, "the funny thing is, even though I invented this word, it's not my word anymore. Frindle belongs to everyone now. And I guess everyone will figure out what happens together. So you see, remember that back in the other chapters, Nick will say, but that's my word, my word. But look what he says now. He says, you see, it says, the funny thing is, even though I invented it, it's not my word anymore. Frindle belongs to everyone now. And I guess everyone will figure out what happens together. And so, boys and girls, I'm going to stop here. This will be part 1. And then I'm going to continue with part 2 on the next day. Just because, like I said, this chapter is long and it's really good. And I really want you to really think about it a lot. So I'm going to leave it here. I'm going to leave it off where it says, I'll leave you with this thinking when Nick says, I invented it. It's not my word anymore. Frindle belongs to everyone now. And I guess everyone will figure out what happens together. And so we will find out, see if the word is going to continue or if it's going to stop. And then I'm still thinking, who's going to win? Mrs. Granger or Nick? Okay? So we'll continue with part 2 tomorrow or whenever, the next day. So I will see you next time. Bye, boys and girls.